Welcome back to another episode of the That's Rank podcast, where we usually rank your ideas on the fly. But tonight, Rob, that's Rob, by the way. Hello, Rob.
G'day. Howdy.
Howdy, partner. My name's Liam. But today we're doing something a little bit different. As you can see, it's just the two of us, just the two originals, the two OGs. We're back to do it again, and we're going to be trying something a little bit different tonight. We're going to be doing a little thing, what I'm calling Gate 42. Presented by the That's Rank podcast. Chuck it all in there. But yes, we're going to be talking about some really cool travel stories tonight. That's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to chuck the That's Rank stuff in there as well. Don't you worry. We're going to be putting a little bit of a rank spin on it. But tonight, it's all about hearing some stories from Mr. Rob over here, talking about some of my own experiences from the world abroad. We're going to be talking tonight about the best parts about working overseas. Isn't that right, Rob?
That is correct. So what is the Gate 42 podcast thing? Because this sounds like something. This sounds like a new thing, and I'm curious. What are we doing here?
So Gate 42 is an idea that I had a little while ago, and I thought we'd give it a crack tonight, as it's just the lads.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be talking to different people, talking about travel stories of a whole range of ideas and topics. So tonight we'll be talking about what it's like to work abroad, the best things about it. I'm going to get some flight attendants in here talking about their experiences doing that gig and what it's like. Who knows? We can get all sorts. What it's like to be a backpacker, what it's like to be a food traveler. Maybe I'll get you back on for that one. I know what you're like. And we'll get we can get Matt back. Matt can come and talk about what it's like to be a photographer when we travel, all sorts of stuff. I think we can tie it into That's Rank by just, chucking a little bit of a rank at the end, which I believe you've prepared some stuff for.
I'm ready to rank, as always. I mean, it's second nature now. I think now we're doing this podcast for so long, I wake up and I just start ranking things. I'm like,
Dude,
top
I
three
did the
coffee?
same thing
Not this morning.
Hey, for real though, true talk. I went to Melbourne with my dad recently, and known as one of the coffee capitals of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And might I say, bitterly disappointed as to what coffee was served up in Melbourne.
Really?
I think my dad would agree. Yeah,
was
a little bit
bitter?
surprised.
Is bitter a pun? Was bitter the part of the problem?
Yeah, bitter was part of the problem, very much so. bitter, and them burning the beans like they'd been roasted on open fire, but actually on the fire.
Yeah.
But aside from, before we get into everything, all the pleasantries, Rob, I want you to tell everybody at home, because it is still a That's Rank podcast after all.
Yep.
Where can people get us? Where can people give us ideas for our normal episodes on the wheel? It's up there. Where can they get us?
Well, they can find us at That's Rank Pod, at Gmail, at Instagram, at YouTube. Probably the three most monitored and safest options, and then at Threads as well, and certainly not at X, because X is now our XX.
It's an XX.
It's the XX.
To be fair, though, when it was Twitter, we didn't really use it much either.
We didn't really use it anyway, so no. Twitter's also not missing us. Elon's just like, damn it, so. I've lost the That's Rank podcast. Oh, no.
Falls on him. I can't afford the $8 check mark, so that's why we can't. That's why we can't do it. We can't do it. So yes, welcome tonight to our little pod about working abroad. The best things about it. Rob, you've been around.
I've been around, but I'm excited to be a part of the Gate 42 podcast and community, and I'm excited that today we're doing a little hybrid podcast of the two, and I'm excited to hit like and subscribe. To Gate 42 once it's launched, and as a reminder also to hit like and subscribe and give us our 5 stars, because we are just gagging for it here at the That's Rank podcast. 5 stars, right. It will help people find us and listen.
It will indeed. It's very important to find us, because we do some good stuff. We've been doing this for nearly 2 years now, so I truly believe if you go back and you can listen to all of our archives, I know you can't believe it either, can you?
No, my eyebrows raised. So, whoa, existential crisis.
That's right. But sometimes you're going to mix it up. So thank you, Rob, for giving us giving the old Gate 42 idea a crack. And yes, once that channel is up and running, I will let everyone know for sure. But this one will be on the That's Rank podcast. That's where this one will be.
And
Now,
you know what I do learn when I have an existential crisis?
what do you do? What do you do?
I either plan to or actually do
Yeah.
move abroad to work.
Get out of
That's
here.
what I do. That's my solution
Yeah.
to that situation. Taryn can
What?
probably agree, actually, because that's what she's just
Yeah.
gone and done.
She has. She's shipped herself off to Deutschland. She's off in Germany
Mhm,
at the moment,
mhm,
setting herself up over there.
mhm.
What do you think it is, though? What do you think it is about us, travel-minded people that makes us think, things aren't going so great here. Let's bounce and go see what it's like elsewhere.
Well, I don't know. What is it? I mean, it's a it does start often with wanting something new or wanting something more or just going,
Hmm.
is this the best place for me where I'm at right now? That's
Hmm.
the first question. And then the next question is, well, what can I do? And that's often a pretty complicated question to ask and can be a really confusing question to
It
ask
can.
because you're like, gosh, I want to move outside. I want to go somewhere new.
Hmm.
Fortunately, there's only several hundred countries in the world, so it's really easy to have a clear option and just to make a decision on it.
The question is, are there enough countries? That's my question. Are there enough?
No, I think we need more countries
Yes,
because
not
God
less.
knows borders and barriers and nationalism has only ever caused good things to the planet Earth. So God knows, let's have more
Yeah.
of them, more of them. So it is a funny one. It's really daunting, I think, but it does stem, I think, from being maybe like wanting a little bit more, and wanting to live your life because we've only got one bite of the apple, so to speak. One
It's
bite of the
true.
cherry. So
Yeah.
let's make the most of it. And the best things I've ever done have really, well, some of the best things I've ever done have been, getting a backpack and having
Yeah.
25 kilos or 20 kilos of luggage and just jumping on a plane and getting the hell out of here and having to go and
There's
start something
something
new.
something quite cathartic about that as well, taking your entire life and packing it into one, maybe two bags and just being like, right, that's
Mm,
it. That's my life now.
this is it.
That,
Yeah.
and it shows we can do it. Do you know what I mean? Like we've got all
Mm,
this stuff that, everywhere, you know, but we can do it. We can do it with very little.
mm,
We just like our creature comforts, which I think is another reason why it's really good to get out and, and travel abroad and experience different things is because you can
yeah,
get away from these creature comforts and kind of challenge yourself a little bit, which is
definitely.
what I found when I've gone abroad and I've traveled and I've
Mm,
worked and lived overseas. Same kind of thing. It's a challenge every single time. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but every time you get something out of it. You get
yeah.
something to come home and tell friends about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean,
Mhm.
that's what eventually what brought me back to Australia was wanting some creature comforts and wanting to have a place, wanting to buy a piece of furniture and being like,
Yeah,
I want to buy a good bit of furniture. And I want to just like be like, this is my couch
yeah,
for, the foreseeable future and not be like just, bouncing from rental to rental. But now that I've
yeah.
been back for, damn, 9 years.
Oh wow,
Whoa,
has it been that
wowzers.
long? Has it been that long?
Wowzers. So, yeah, I came back in 2015.
You said before we started, where has time gone? Good question. Very good question.
I came back and moved back to Australia in February 2015.
Hmm.
So, 8.5 years ago.
Damn man, no wonder you got the bug. No wonder you got the itch. Got
Yeah.
to get out of here. It's
Yeah.
it's
So,
it's a,
yeah, it's a good time to go. Yeah.
yeah,
What else is
and
out there?
it's not an itch that everyone has either. I will say that. Like, not everyone has the same kind of urge
Hmm.
where they need a change, and the first thing they think about is, right, where else am I going to go? It's a very, um, not niche. It's not niche at all, but it's something that doesn't speak to everybody. But
Hmm.
I think for the people who it does speak to, will be able to relate with a lot of the stuff we talk about
Hmm.
tonight. I think so. I think so.
I think so too.
Um,
I think so too. I
yeah.
think you're either, everyone's my favorite story. This is one of my favorite stories about
Hmm.
difference and how there's no right or wrong. And I listened to a podcast about a New York Times journalist who was based in New York and often thought that they were somehow failing at life because they weren't more adventurous. They would
Right.
sit there and they would hear these stories, particularly from colleagues of people that were out and about in the world, going on these wild adventures, and they
Yeah.
would think, I'm I'm missing out on something. I'm not doing things right because I'm just sitting at home and drinking red wine on the couch and watching, Real Housewives. So the
Sounds all right to
opportunity,
me.
the opportunity came up, right? And it said, go make a story in the jungles of the Amazon about these caves. And this person signed up for it. They went to the Amazon. They went to the jungle. They went into the caves. And it was at the point that they were knee deep in bat poo, guapa, walking through a guapa lake. And they're just like, they're sweaty. They've been walking for hours. They're knee deep in bat shit. And he looked, and they looked over to the wall of the cave, and they just saw this massive snake just like sliding up the wall.
Shit.
And that was the point where they realized, you know what? There's nothing wrong with being the kind of person that likes to sit at home on the couch and watch the Real Housewives. Some people live for that adventure. Some people don't. I think that's the end of the day. Like I'm kind of both. Like I would be quite happy to be on a couch drinking red wine, watching Real Housewives. But I would like to be doing that in the jungles of the Amazon. The bat poo and the snake I can leave to the side. But, I quite like being a homebody, but I like to have a home elsewhere. I don't know. It's one of those ones. Everyone's different.
So you want to go to the caves of the Amazon, trench through the guapa, and just hope at the end of that cave there's a lovely TV, a lovely couch, a bottle of Shiraz.
Yeah, do you have Wi-Fi? Is that that's a... Oh, no TV? What? Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought that was on the brochure. Oh, okay.
Yeah. The brochure. What do you reckon the brochure?
Does the snake have a TV?
Yes. What do you reckon what do you reckon the brochure for a trip to the Amazon caves would look like?
I don't know. Yeah,
I guarantee there wouldn't be a 5-star
picture. There wouldn't be a couch, a glass of wine.
There wouldn't be a couch.
That's not what they'd be pushing forward. No. But anyway, I like that story because everyone's different, and but you got to find your. But certain people do want to mix it up and want to get out there and want to
absolutely.
There's a sense of adventure, Liam. A sense of adventure.
A sense of adventure is important. That is the inside joke that two of us will get, those two being Rob and myself. But no, it's interesting, right? Because like I think there's so much to learn from different places and different cultures, and you don't really get to know that unless you do it for the first time, for the very, very first time. So, Rob, what was your first one? What was your first time? What was the first time you dipped the toe into the living abroad?
Lifestyle. So the year was 2003. I had gone from an unsuccessful year working at Retrovision to an unsuccessful year studying commerce at Curtin to 2 more enjoyable years, but not necessarily successful years studying film and television at Eve County University.
Not successful at that? No?
It was definitely more to my interests, and I enjoyed it, and I went back but I mean the study, like the study itself, wasn't very scholarly, let's just say. And
gotcha.
I had gone to a share house, and that had kind of fallen apart, and I ended up back at my parents' house, and me and my dad were watching a film called Legends of the Fall, and there's this, I don't know if you've seen Legends of the Fall.
Who are you talking to? No, I've not seen Legends of the Fall. Yeah.
The other person that I'm doing the podcast with.
You're talking to me? I've not seen Legends of the Fall. No.
So Legends of the Fall, it's got Brad Pitt as one of 3 brothers. They all fall in love with the same woman. And their father is Anthony Hopkins. But it's set in like the early 1900s, and Brad Pitt's character is like a real adventurer. Like he just goes off on these wild adventures, and he just goes, searching the globe to try to make sense of it all. And I was watching it, and then I think my dad goes, "Well, why don't you just go traveling, Rob?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's a really good idea." I was watching Brad Pitt. I remember this shot of Brad Pitt in a boat, and I was like, "I gotta get out of here." And I was like, "I'm gonna go to Costa Rica." And he's like, "Why are you going to Costa Rica?" And I'm like, "I've got no idea, but I've just it just sounds kind of nice. I just heard the words somewhere." And he's like, "Well, you've got no money, and you've never been traveling before, and you don't speak Spanish.
Mhm.
You've got no real qualification. So he's like, why don't you just start out in the UK and go to the UK because you've got some family there, and maybe just go there and then go there and save money and then go to Costa Rica. And I was like, okay, that's not a bad idea. So I went down to the STA Travel at Curtin University, and I booked my flights to London. And I emailed my cousin Kirsten, and they put me up, which was very generous and kind of them. And I had about 5.5 weeks, and I think I had about $200, and I went to a job agency. So it was travel agent, and then it was job agency.
Well, your dad did tell you that you had no qualifications, so you had to go somewhere.
I had to go somewhere, exactly. And this was this was pre-internet, really. Like, not pre-internet. The internet was a thing, but like you just didn't really.
You had to speak to people.
Yeah, you still pretty much had to go in and speak to people. So I went in and spoke to this guy. I always remember the guy, and he was from Ireland, I think. Anyway, I got a job. This is when they were building the Perth Convention Centre, and in the Perth Convention Centre, I've never seen them in there, but there must be like blinds, like these big steel blinds, everywhere.
Yeah. There are.
I had to hammer the plastic end, like for the hinge. There was a little plastic hinge. And I had to take the empty aluminium blind and hammer in the plastic end for the hinge for all the blinds in the Perth Convention Centre. And I did so looking out. It was at a Welshpool warehouse, and I looked out onto the airport, and I was just watching planes take off every day as I was just sitting there hammering plastic end into plastic end, watching planes take off. And then I went to London, and I soon realised I just didn't have the money for London because my cousin Kirsten and her partner at the time was very, they're pretty well off. They had a really nice flash pad in Notting Hill, and I was like, this place would be great. Like, with these kind of qualifications, this lifestyle, London's great. So I was a bit of an Irvine Welsh fan and a bit of like a alternative cinema fan, and and so I really liked the film Trainspotting, and I had a friend in Edinburgh, and I decided I'm going to go up to Edinburgh. So I went to Edinburgh, and I stayed there for about 3.5 years, with a little 6-month stint in Nottingham, but mostly in Edinburgh for about 3 years.
Very nice.
And then I went and worked in kitchens, worked as a cook, and then I decided to go to Canada. And then I went to Canada. I got a job in the islands of Ontario on an archipelago off Lake Huron, on a little lived on an island with bears. Only accessible by boat. And then at the end of that, I went to ski season in Canada. It'd been about 3.5 years at that point. And then I just remember looking around, and I was like, this was fun, but I think it's time for me to go back home and go back to university and do something. And I bought my ticket and went home.
There we go. So you got a pretty good like little stint out of that. 3.5 years of going and bouncing around. I mean, what made you what was one of the things that made you kind of like being over there and want to stay for that long? Because to me 3.5 years is a long time, definitely longer than I've ever gone on one of those adventures.
What was it? I don't know, you just kind of get into a rhythm. You just kind of get into a rhythm of things. I guess I wanted to travel more. I just didn't really have much desire to come home. It wasn't until I really kind of wanted to get a bit more serious professionally that I came home.
Gotcha.
So I was quite happy just to kind of go through and do what I was doing. Yeah. Just didn't occur to me.
Live in the moment.
Kind of. I think you kind of, that's what you do in life, right? You just find yourself on a little track until you get a little tap on the shoulder. It says it's time to move on, or you've got a new idea, or you've got some kind of reason to change direction. I probably didn't have much reason to change direction until I was enjoying it, until I wasn't enjoying it so much, at least Edinburgh. And then, I think a friend of mine, there's a lot going on. I came back to Australia because I had to, because of my visa.
The pesky visa.
The old pesky visa issue. And a friend of mine died. And me and my sister went to Prague for his funeral. And I think after that's probably also when I started to make a new plan for whatever reason.
Yeah, right. Sometimes it takes a massive kind of event, be it good or bad, to kind of be a catalyst for something next, something to change. But yeah.
Yeah. Had you
Yeah.
asked me that, I probably wouldn't have been able to articulate it too much. But on reflection, you kind of go, yeah, actually, when you look at the timeline, it probably makes
Yeah.
sense that I would have been like, I've been here for a couple of years now. Like I've been here for a little bit. So,
Hmm.
there wasn't much more Edinburgh was showing me. So, and I'd had some good
I guess that's
friends that were Canadian, and they'd gone back to Canada as well. I had quite a few people go from Edinburgh back to Canada, and I was like, well,
you
I got
make a lot of
friends. I got
connections on
friends
those
that,
trips, don't you?
yeah, yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, the friendships that you make are one of the, if this was just a top three things about travel. Well, we've done one of those already, haven't we? The top three things about travel, and I think
But
the
I
friends
think
that
so.
you make
Yeah.
along the way was that number one? Should have been number one.
Oh, that was the one we did with Matt. The top three best things about hostels. But best
Yes.
thing about staying at hostels. Yeah, which you can listen now in the That's Rank archives. Shameless plug.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So that was
yeah.
yeah. It is one of the things. It's the connection that you make. There's something powerful about a connection that you make. I mean, I still have pretty regular contact with a couple of guys that I knew from those Edinburgh years. That was probably my
Yeah.
formative years. I feel like I became an
Well,
adult of sorts.
speaking of, that's actually a good segue into the first time I went traveling by
Mm,
myself and worked overseas. A very similar thing. Like it was literally a massive turning point in my life. Like as a kid, I was a very kind of shy, I was bullied a lot. I didn't really know how to handle that kind of stuff. But when I was 18, I went and moved to New Jersey in America and went to the summer camps
mm,
and
mm.
worked over there. And I was only reflecting on this the other day with Robbo, who's my buddy, who I met him at that summer camp. Um, and
Wow.
here we are nearly 20 years later, still good mates. Um, but where we were, you kind of had to make friends because that's how you survived it, right? We were
Mm,
in. People think of the summer camps in America; they get that movie kind of image of it, like out in the forests. You're doing all
mm.
this like really cool stuff, and not so that we weren't, but jet skiing and doing all that stuff. Our camp was in the middle of suburban New Jersey, in next to a park. Basically, we had our
Yeah.
camp, and then we had a massive shopping mall across the road, which is where we would spend our days off.
Yeah.
But I
Right.
was reflecting on this with Robbo, and it was like I was only 18 at the time. He would have been slightly older. But I was an 18-year-old kid who had been put into a very adult situation to look after literally kids. Like they were 4 years younger than me. And that's the
Yeah.
bit that's crazy for me looking back on it, that these guys weren't that much younger than I was. But here I
No.
was in a position that I was put into a lot of responsibility to look after these kids. I saved a girl's life because I was hired as a lifeguard for no other reason than I was Australian. And I literally, they were like, "You're Australian, you can swim, off you go." Had to do this hectic like swimming test beforehand as well, which nearly killed me.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember
That would have been hilarious
walking,
if it well, it wouldn't have been hilarious if it had killed you, but like you were like you're the lifeguard, and then they're like, oh my god, I'm drowning. It's like, oh damn,
save
we
me.
lost another one.
I have learned. We got to stop hiring these Aussies. It's crazy. We've got the wrong idea about them altogether.
Hey man, it's a sink or swim, literally.
And literally, well, this girl I saved, she nearly done sinked. That's what did I just say?
Damn,
She nearly done sinked.
she
So
nearly
she was a
done
young
sink.
girl. She would have been about 6 or 7, and there was a strict
She
rule that
sinked.
if you hadn't passed the swimming test, which was literally one lap at the pool, then
Mm,
the kids weren't allowed to go on the deep end. And I was on a day off, and I walked around the side of the pool, just saying good day to my friends who were working the lifeguard shift. And I looked down and I saw this girl like literally just below the surface, and she couldn't get back up. And I remember just like clothes, like all my normal clothes, not the camp uniform, just jumped in, shoes and all, grabbed her, pulled her out, and
whoa.
it was like it was hectic, man. It was like
Did she need any CPR or anything like that, or
no, thankfully she must have only just started struggling because I got her out. She was coughing and spluttering, but she wasn't quite there yet. But if I wasn't walking past at that time,
mm,
no, she was in the back corner of the pool where no one would have seen her, and I just happened to be
damn,
walking past at
yeah,
that particular time.
yeah,
And you know what? Cheeky little thing. Every time I saw her as I was walking around camp, she'd walk around, just poke her tongue out at me. I was like, "Missy moo,
cheeky thing.
I
Well,
saved your
public service
life."
announcement: having someone that works in a pediatric emergency department.
Mm.
Pool safety, everybody. Pool
Yes,
safety.
very
Don't take
important.
risks. Don't take
No,
risks.
don't assume that they're always safe because
Put a
One
fence.
look away, done.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but here's me, this 18-year-old kid, and I was dealing with these kids who had pretty heavy life stories. Like they were underprivileged kids, so they had parents who were in jail, parents who were abusive, all that kind of stuff. Like really kind of heavy,
Mm.
heavy, heavy stuff. And here's me, this 18-year-old kid, and it put a lot of things into perspective for me. It was just like, well, maybe I don't have it so bad. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe,
Yeah.
what I have is I'm very privileged and very lucky to be where I am. And I came away from that whole experience with a whole different viewpoint on life in general. Like it just literally morphed me. And I truly believe this into the person I am today because I learned so many things from not only the other campers who were in the same position as I was, but
Mm.
from those kids and being able to give these kids a bit of vibrancy and a bit of happiness for if they were there for a week or the full 8 weeks,
Mm.
I was able to give them something. And I remember I got to travel around a bit afterwards, but that first kind of working experience overseas in a completely different culture, and yes, America is a different culture. I know that we're all kind of from the same mold in a certain way, but it's a different kettle of fish over there. It really truly is. So
Mm.
being exposed to that, and then that's what triggered everything for me, like needing to go
Mm.
out and explore different places and travel. Like it really was that
Mm.
kind of catalyst, and it was a really formative experience, like
Mm.
stupidly so. Like hindsight's great, not hindsight. Reminiscing about it is just
Yeah. Yeah. It really
it
makes
really
you
makes me.
realize.
It does, man. It
Yeah.
does, and that and
You're
that
like,
and
that
it
was a
triggers it.
damn fork. People talk about forks in the road. And the funny thing is, when you're at a fork in the road, you really, really go, I'm at a fork in the road. But when you
Yeah,
look back at it, you go, God damn it, that was a fork.
100%,
You go, fork in
100%.
hell. That was a fork in the road. And actually, if you don't mind, I might, that links quite well into my number
Oh,
three.
yeah, I like that. Yeah, jump on in. What's number three?
You want me to jump in? So
Yeah, go
my
on.
number three thing about working abroad is the privilege it provides you in access to a place,
Mm,
access to people, and access to a community. Because
yeah,
when you're
for sure.
backpacking and traveling, you're kind of hanging around a lot of other travelers for the most part.
Mhm.
When you work in a place and you have a job in a place, you meet people from that place.
Yeah,
And it gives you an access to that place that you just can't get in any other way. You form relationships with
yeah,
people you wouldn't be meeting at a backpacker hostel or a hotel or at an expat bar. Like you meet,
yeah,
you're meeting the people that live there,
yeah,
and you're an outsider, and they've been kind enough to welcome you into their world,
sometimes.
and help guide you through it. And I think that is the thing about working in a place, is that it really opens
Yeah,
up so many doors into really understanding the people and the communities
yeah,
that you're in.
100%. I can't agree more. I can't agree more. Is that why you find nowadays, like, I know we went to Japan recently together,
Mm.
and we were in the planning stages, you were very much, um, all for the idea of just staying in one place for an extended period of time, be that 5 days a week. Do you reckon that kinda comes back to that point you just made? Like, it's a case of you get to experience all this experience that
Yeah,
a bit more?
that's definitely what I'm seeking when I do that. So as a traveler, I do like to probably take my time. Although a real highlight for me was that trip and the road trip that we took and all the places that we saw, and the kind of exposure to so many different places. Like that had kind of
Yeah,
forced that was a bit out of my comfort zone into a kind of a different style.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
And I got a lot out of that because I got to meet lots of people, and we got to hit the road. I love a good road trip.
Oh,
But I do love also the flip side of that coin. I do love just sitting in a
mm,
place and through work. But I remember once I was in Thailand, living in Thailand, and every 3 months, every 90 days, we have to do a border run. And sometimes, you could go up.
yes, that's right. Another cut. If we could just have one little session without a little bit of a cheeky technical issue, Rob, what do you reckon?
I'm hoping that this is going to go well from here, Liam. I'm hoping that
I
we've made
believe.
some technical changes,
I
and
believe. I
it's going
believe.
to be smooth sailing. But I
You
do
were talking
remember
about
roughly
Burma.
where I was at. Yeah,
You were talking about
yeah.
Burma. You've gone across the border. That's right.
Well, so I was in Chiang Mai, and we had to make border runs every 90 days. And sometimes you could take like a cheap close option, so you could go up to Burma You could just do a little border pop at Burma on a bus after 12 hours. You go to Laos.
Ooh, fun.
You could go to Cambodia or Vietnam even. And I
Huh.
decided, I was just sitting there talking to my friend Justine, who you met
I did.
not that long ago.
She was lovely.
And she's a very lovely person. And she
Yeah.
goes, Rob, why don't you just go somewhere? Go somewhere. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to Taiwan. And she's like, yeah, go to Taiwan. So I went to Taiwan for 10 days and I had no plan. And I was in the middle of a university semester and I was doing like extra work outside of work.
Yeah.
So I took leave from work, but I still had uni papers to go. So I went to Taiwan. I went to Taipei. And I just stayed the whole 10 days in Taipei. And I got this little Airbnb in this little, really beautiful little, like this felt like a community. Like there was a market, a street market every night. There was a couple of really nice coffee shops. And I just went down to the coffee shop and just sat in the coffee shop and wrote my essays and got to know the staff that worked at the coffee shop, got to know the owner of the coffee shop, went to a few other coffee shops that he owned and plotted around. And every now and then I would go off and do a little bit of sightseeing, but I was still having to write these papers. And it felt like I was kind of living there. And that was when I realized like I like this part of travel. I like to just sit in a place and get to know people and really soak it up. Because I think that's very different to sightseeing and breezing through a road trip style.
100%. And I got a bit of that when at the end of our trip when we were back in Tokyo. Obviously, I went back for a little bit before you came back and joined for a night, but I had like a week there by myself, and it felt like I was just part of the culture, part of the furniture, I should say. Like it was just like I was meant to be. That's a really nice feeling. It's a really nice feeling. Now, before we jump into because we would be remiss not to talk about our time living together, working in Japan. But I want to jump back to what took you to Cambodia and Laos. Those are the two places that you went and did some work for. What was it? The
Cambodia.
Australian volunteer?
Thailand and Laos.
Thailand and Laos. That's right. Yes.
Yeah. It was
what were you doing?
I'll tell you the story then. Take a knee, sit down. I'll tell you a story because we talked a bit about earlier about being a bit overwhelmed by choice as to where to go and why to do it and what to do. And my sister, Louise, had done a few years working in East Timor, Timor-Leste, and I'd gone over and visited. Wow. And she'd gotten over there initially through her work as a VIDA, which was a Volunteer for International Development of Australia. I don't know what the A stands for, maybe Australia. And she did a couple of years VIDA, and then she got a job working for New Zealand Aid, I think. And she was in Timor-Leste for a while. And that was, so she kind of told me about this volunteer program. So I kind of started keeping an eye on it. And at that point I was working in like media and communications and education in particular. I was working at ECU. So given the education role, I just started looking around and I'd really kind of got this, I'd read this book called Emergency Sex. Now, Emergency Sex is a book written by 3 aid workers. So it was all about being an aid worker and working in community development, and in the book at least, working in conflict areas. Where sometimes you where you needed to have emergency sex because it may have been the very last time.
Right, I got
so I'd read this.
I was wondering where the tie-in was going to be.
I was reading the book, and I was just like, I had this kind of start to get this little interest in international like community development work. And for my sister, I'd found out about the Australian Volunteer Program. So I started by looking at one called the Australian Youth Ambassadors for Development, which was specifically targeted for people under 30. And I went for a role in Mongolia because I was like, I want somewhere interesting. I want somewhere adventurous because at that point in my life, I just did not see. So I thought Southeast Asia was a bit touristy.
Sure. Yep. And
for some reason, like I'd read this book called The Beach by Alex Garland, which was all a little bit cynical around Southeast Asian tourism, and not so much about it. It wasn't cynical about the countries of Southeast Asia; it was cynical about the tourists.
Sure, yeah.
And I'd read this book, and I was just like, I want to go to Mongolia because that's like real adventure. And then I didn't get the Mongolia job. So then the next round came along, and there was a job in Laos, which kind of hit my work criteria. So I applied for the Laos job, and I ended up getting the Laos job in Vientiane. And went and did that for 12 months.
And so, what was your role though? What were you doing in Laos?
I was working for the Lao. Oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the agency. It was the Foreign Languages Department, I think. Well, anyway, for the basics for an English language newspaper called the Vientiane Times,
Okay.
and I was doing. I was working in their like digital media department, so we were trying to
Right.
kind of upskill them in video making and things like that. And I was doing lots of kind of other little workshops for people around other organizations that were around the country. It was a little bit messy, as a lot of these placements kind of were.
Yeah.
But it was in the case of Lao was Laos a pretty interesting place to work. It's a communist country.
Messy. How? Like, what do you mean by messy?
Where does one start, Liam? Where does one start? So look, it's a communist country. It remains a communist country. So it's the People's Democratic Republic of Laos,
Mhm.
and it had a revolution in the wars of Southeast Asia in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and it basically locked itself off, closed itself off from the world, like North Korea, until the late 80s, early 90s, when it started to reopen itself. It was
Yeah,
also one
right.
of the kind of as far as development goes, it was still a very, very poor country.
Mhm.
Hence the role of the program, and yeah, just the politics of Laos is really like nothing you've ever really seen in a way. For the people of Laos, it probably makes a lot of sense, but for
Sure.
us,
Yeah.
it was a very difficult kind of environment to navigate. And the AED program had been cancelled for a number of years. Uh, for a variety of reasons. And then we were the first group back. So like we were the first 4 volunteers back into the country. So we were all kind of put in to like different departments, but maybe we were the first ones back. So there was a little bit of pressure in that sense. And,
Yeah.
it's hard to really explain. And I'm aware as well that like, I got such amazing opportunities from that program and from that opportunity that I also, don't want to. I remember it very fondly, and the
Oh, yeah.
relationships I have with the people that I worked with are still pretty
Mhm.
strong. Like I went back a few years ago and caught up with the guys I worked with, and there was a real
Was it
bond that we kind
was
of
it one of
formed.
one of the gents who took us on the road trip when I came and visited
It
you?
was. I saw Buck Thai again, if you remember Buck
Buck
Thai.
Thai. Yeah.
So we went
Yeah.
and I went and caught up with him and Buck Pong and Buck Thai. But yeah, it was just it's hard to explain because really, it's such a radically different place. And that's when I said early on that I felt Southeast Asia was a bit touristy and I wasn't interested, I was like ignorant
Yeah.
as anything. Like I was ignorant and I was naive and I was arrogant.
Hey. Hey.
And then I kind of got a real reality check as to just how unique that place was. That part of the world
You
is.
think you were ignorant? Remember the first thing I wanted when I rocked up and I visited you?
Dude,
Get off a 12 hour
Subway.
subway. Get off a 12-hour flight from London. Hungry as all get out. You're like, okay, we're hitting the road straight away.
Mm-hmm.
And then, getting the ute.
You're like, I
And
really want a
I
Subway.
was,
And I was like, I
yeah,
got
we're
bad
on a
news
subway.
for you, buddy.
Man, here's me thinking there'd be a Macca's around the corner. Speaking of ignorant, that
No.
was me 100% when I got to Laos. Because that was
Yeah.
a beautiful, very different place.
Yeah.
I
Well, I
loved it
mean,
though.
for
I
example,
love
no McDonald's. Like, there's no McDonald's in the whole country
no,
back then. There may
no,
still not be, but that's something in and of itself to be a place. No cinema, no McDonald's.
no cinema. What did you do?
Well, actually, so funny enough, there was a whole lot of as a romantic of cinema. Like, I really
Yeah.
felt like I got some great stories. So, firstly, there's a conservator that's been living in Laos for decades called Marion, and
Marion.
Marion Ravenswood. Now, she worked in the Australian film industry for a long time, and
Uh-huh.
and she would never deny this, but the rumor was that she was the inspiration for the character from the Indiana Jones films, in particular, the Raiders of the Lost Ark. She was the
Yeah,
inspiration for
right.
Marion Ravenscroft because there's a character called Marion Ravenscroft who is a big
Well,
drinker and quite a tough person, and that's Marion
uh-huh.
Ravenswood, and she was a
Yeah,
conservative
right.
living in Laos. And she'd worked in, she'd been connected to like the original Mad Max films, and she was friends with Peter Weir, and and knew guys like George Lucas and Harrison Ford back in the day. And the urban legend was that she is the inspiration for Marion Ravenswood. Anyway, so she was this fountain of knowledge about the country, and there's all these little hidden secret cinemas. Because particularly during the revolution and as the use of communist propaganda was important, so there's actually lots of little broken down film projectors that are all strewn through the jungle, and there's a couple of old kind of rundown cinemas. And if you go to like the caves up in the northern part of the country where the kind of Communist Party where they based themselves, there's this huge network of caves which was fully protected because you can't actually bomb it, because Laos is famously the most bombed country per capita in the history of the world.
You wouldn't think it, would you? You wouldn't think it. I still remember walking around there, or we were driving past these fields, and there'd be like the sign saying there are unexploded ammunitions around here.
Yeah.
Don't be stepping around here, because you
100%.
could find yourself in a bit of mischief.
House is literally built and fences built from like shells, and anyway, so they had this really crazy history in cinema history that I was kind of like being connected to, but best of all, there was a guy in Central Laos who ran the best pirate DVD shop you've ever seen in your entire life. So he was a huge film buff, and he would just find like the most current, relevant, coolest stuff. He would have all the classics, and you could go and buy a DVD for like a buck. And he always had the best quality. So, for example, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 came out while I was in Laos, and all the places around town had a pirated Russian version from like a handy cam. That guy refused he refused to hold that one. He was like, I'm not putting that one in my collection. I'm waiting for the DVD rip. And when I've got the high quality DVD rip, will you be able to buy a copy of Harry Potter in this store? And I had to wait. I had to wait for that guy to have a copy of it before I could watch it at home.
Top quality pirates. That's what we need. Where are these people like it?
And hey, look. So back then, the only reason I'm divulging this piracy history of mine is because there was no cinema to go to. There was no streamers to pay. There was no, the internet really barely got me a phone call. It was almost as bad as it has been tonight, Liam, trying to record this episode. Like getting video from the internet was pretty much impossible. So like my only access was through this guy, and I got exposed to some great cinema through that guy. So that was a bit of an aside, but yeah, cinema.
Nice.
Point
you got to
being,
find your ways.
Just a totally radically different place.
100%. What do you reckon the most notable like cultural difference was, though? The one thing that stood out the most in terms of something that took you just ripped you out of your comfort zone entirely.
It's probably more just the reflections on your own privilege. So, and just understanding how things worked. So for example, how can I kind of say this, Lamb? I'm trying to think of a nice way to kind of say just reflecting on my own privilege. Like it was just constant reminders. So and my ignorance again. So I remember we went for a restaurant, and it was pretty early on in my days there. And another one of the volunteers came over from Vietnam, and she was like, "Oh, are you enjoying yourself here?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's great." And she's like, "What do you like about it?" And I was like, "Well, I love the food. It's so good and it's so cheap." And she's like, "Oh, you like the cheap food, do you?" And I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, it's only cheap because the people who make it and farm it and produce it aren't getting paid enough." And I was like, "Oh," I was like, she was right. Yeah. Like, she's totally right. Yeah. And there I was, like, walking around going, "Oh, look at my cheap food. Like, this is so good." And she was like, "Well, Rob, it shouldn't be so cheap." And I'm like, "You know what? It actually shouldn't be so cheap." So I was pretty naive. And then, you'd see, like, I said the Alex Garland Beach thing and the whole Southeast Asian tourist thing. Like, you would get a lot of young people that were all cashed up from wherever Western country that they came from. And they would come to Laos. And they would form this kind of, like, they found their identity through as the identity of a backpacker, and they would get the Thai fisherman pants, and they would, like they would walk around in, clothing which maybe from a Lao point of view, wasn't particularly classy. Let's just say that.
Sure.
And there was a couple of occasions of like people walking around in bathing suits, which was a big no-no, which was quite disrespectful. But there was also just occasions of generally just people like looking like a backpacker. And at first I was like, well, live and let live. They should be able to do what they want to do. That's fine. But then listening to some of my colleagues, and firstly, like they would dress well, because to dress well meant you have face, you hold face, and you have status. And even though people weren't getting paid a lot of money, particularly those that worked in government, $120 a month USD.
Jeez.
They would still be dressing very well. And the reason they would dress very well is because of the status embroiled in how you look. And they didn't have the privilege or the luxury to grow their hair out, to come to work unshaved, to walk, like they had to look the part. And it was literally it was literally almost a difference between maybe not life or death, but between, going back to a fairly like difficult existence, or, working at a lower socioeconomic job, or maintaining a job in government, which meant you had to obtain the look. So for them, it was quite disrespectful that we would come in, young people, who were well below, their age, and therefore hadn't earned the respect that they had earned, and would walk around, for lack of a better word, like they would walk around like what they would perceive as a poorer person, right? And that was for them was disrespectful because of all the work that they had put in to try to put on an image of the status that they had attained. So it felt like almost like rubbing your face in it. Like you're rubbing, and one of my colleagues kind of looked, and he looked at a group of travelers, and he was like, I can never do what they do. I'll literally never have the opportunity to do what they're doing, which is taking a year off and living in Asia. I can't take a year off. Like I'll never be able to afford that. So it was, for them, it was very disrespectful to, because that was all about maintaining face and keeping face, and it was very important to just getting through and surviving. I don't know if that answers your question, but that was kind of like some real, some real challenging times, was just reflecting on your own privilege, and then also reflecting on my own assumptions about that, because I would probably listen to that story and go, oh well, they're being judgmental of these young people that are traveling. But actually, there was a lot more packed into that judgment. There was a lot packed around economic opportunity. There was a lot packed in around privilege. And I think unpacking that and always trying to see those sides was just a really eye-opening experience.
Well, it does come back to the ignorance you're talking about before, because unless you've experienced that or have any sort of, knowledge about that culture, like I've learned that for the first time just now. And I'm reflecting back on what I was wearing when I was there, because you just don't think 100%. About that as someone who is a traveler to the country. You're not going to have that perspective or that kind of insight.
No, that was the privilege that I had by working in those workplaces and meeting people, talking to people. And look, I was born with bare feet. Like I was born in shorts. Like these are the kind of things that I do to feel comfortable. And I didn't necessarily not do that so much, but I would also just be. And I guess there's other things as well. There's other things around how you conduct yourself in public too. Because if someone was to lose face, for example, if I'm earning $120 a month and I've worked my whole life to get into a position, and if I was to then lose face by becoming angry, becoming loud, becoming direct, becoming noticed or seen in public, like that could mean that myself and my family actually struggle and suffer.
Yeah.
So even just, it was the behaviors as well. It was the behaviors of as you're walking around and just being a bit disrespectful and seeing people be disrespectful. So I think there's always a two-way street. There's always multiple ways to the onion, Liam, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah.
And it was just that first, really trying to wrap your head around like for me, that was the first time I lived. I lived in Edinburgh in Canada, but obviously there's a bit of a
Similarity.
connection to the kind of
Yeah.
like place, like the world that I'd been raised in, which was like this middle class
Sure.
Australian world. And that was the first time I'd ever been and lived somewhere totally radically different. So there was a few real lessons learnt as to dropping my own assumptions at the door and always
That's it.
thinking, and I've still really only scratched the surface.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing as well, right? You only really get to see like the experience that for, because you were there for how long? A year?
A year, yeah. And then I've
Yeah.
been back and
So
forth
in that
quite a
year,
bit. For the first few years after I came back, I was back and forth quite a bit, working on a few projects still. But yeah, just the year.
Yeah, but even in that 1 year, you only really got to see, like you said, just scratch the surface a little bit, which is what kind of, it keeps you kind of enticed in a weird way. Like, even if it is that stuff that you're learning about yourself, that might not, it's not negative, but it definitely puts things in different perspective, and you might look at yourself in the mirror a bit closer about other aspects of your life when you get back home. It still kind of scratches that, it's like a scratchy. You want to see what's next. You want to see what's next, and it's a fascinating story, and I wish we could just jump into that in depth and detail. But does your number two in any point link into your story and
No. So number two might link into something that you've experienced as well. Like, we famously attempted to move to Japan. And
yeah,
it just didn't quite work out. I found ourselves volunteering on a farm in Okinawa. But wherever I've been, whether it was Japan, I remember just walking outside in that little farm in Okinawa, walking outside. In the morning, we'd wake up early and we'd go for a walk through that jungle, and we'd go up to the top of that mountain, and you'd have like the US military base nearby, so you'd have the jets flying over your head. And for me, it was the same in Laos and Vietnam, and not Vietnam, Laos and Thailand, and going back to Edinburgh, I'd walk up to I used to live at the base of the Royal Mile, like one street back. So to get to work, I'd have to walk up a hill and be on the Royal Mile. And I just remember on a daily basis, and this is my number two, it's the daily invigoration and inspiration of just walking outside your front door. Like, you didn't have to go anywhere or do anything much. You would just wake up and be, I'm somewhere different. And you would just walk outside your front door. And in Okinawa, it was that jungle. In Vientiane, it was the motorbikes. In Chiang Mai, it was this like the street stalls and the markets that were nearby. In Edinburgh, it was the Royal Mile, and it was just walking up and just looking at the cobblestone streets and the beautiful architecture, and just being like, or even just one street further, like the main square of Edinburgh, the Edinburgh Castle, and it was just those moments of, I've literally just walked to work, and I've had a moment of inspiration, and that's I think that's my number two, is just the inspiration and invigoration of just going to work, just walking outside your front door.
Yeah, man, I feel that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I mean, because like, I know when in our last trip to Japan, we walked over 500 kilometers, and I sure as shit wouldn't do that here. But when you're, and I know obviously that's just traveling, not working, but even when we were working, even with USA, I was there for a little bit before you got there. But those walks that I would have at nighttime, coming out of class and just walking from the train station in suburban Saitama, like it just everything hit me differently. Like it just felt different, like being in different air almost. Just being in that different air and being able to kind of. You're right. You kind of you think about things more. You reflect more. You kind of you think about what's next a lot more, because when you're here and you're in your normal kind of life, you get into a comfort zone. You don't think about that stuff as much, and when you tend to be like, man, that's depressing. You know what I mean? It's a different kind of it's a different feeling. Like,
and you've just seen it. You've seen it every day of your life as well, so you just know it by the back of your head. Like, it's home. Like, it doesn't take your breath away.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
But
no,
100%.
Like
what was the supermarket we would look at when we were playing cards at Us's house? What was that one?
Oh,
Seibu?
Seibu. Yeah, Seibu. Yeah.
I
Just sitting
remember
on that
just looking,
balcony
like
playing
having
cards.
Cebu in the distance. Like we'd sit there playing cards
Yeah.
and Cebu's in the distance, and it was just like that's just different. Like we
Yeah.
can't get that. We don't get that back home.
No.
Like it was
No.
just daily inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah. And, cribbage, beers, cheeky cigarette every now and then. And they were just looking over that sign. There was something about it, right? There was something about it. It was lovely. Now, let's do it. We'll quickly jump into our time in Japan really quickly, because we did, when you said attempted to work, I think it's important to look at the other side of going to work in a country, and that's when it doesn't quite work out the way you think it's going to work out, and which is definitely what we got in Japan. So I remember, Rob and I both lived in Tokyo. Look, we'll say lived. It was only for a month and a bit, but we'll say lived. Been teaching as conversational English teachers, so not through the regular means of going through your JET programs or anything like that, but I had an old friend from primary school who I'd recently reconnected with. He worked for a company that helped students immigrate into Australia, and his boss had a friend called Asa. I don't think she's going to listen to this and call slander. Also, it's all true. Who kind of just went and took us on board and said, come to Japan and teach conversational English. You'll be teaching adults, mostly housewives. It'll be really, really relaxed, really chill. So we got our visas and we chuffed on over. We headed over to Saitama. Now I remember I got there first because I had just come from London or Europe. I was on some trip through Europe, and I remember I rocked up to Tokorozawa station in Saitama, met Asa, and I got hit in the face. I got hit in the face real quick with the Japanese work ethic and the work expectations.
Yeah,
because I got off that plane, got onto a train, got to Tokorozawa, which is about an hour outside of Tokyo, and Asa's like, "Oh, welcome to Tokorozawa, welcome to Japan." I was like, "Thank you, I'm so excited to be here." And literally the next words out of her mouth were, "Your first class is in 2 hours." And I was like, "Pardon?" I was like, can I have a shower? Can I sleep? Can I do anything?" She's like, No, later. So I was like, okay, fine. That was my experience, my first dive into life in Japan. And I just kind of had that expectation set from the get-go. This was going to be tough graft. But then, she shipped me around to a whole bunch of different. The first week I didn't get paid for because, and I'm pretty sure I warned you about all of this before you got there. I was just like, don't sign the contract.
Yeah.
Don't sign the contract. Because the first week was
I've got no excuse because not only had you warned me, but I'd gone for a meeting at Asa's school here, 2 days before flying out, and the teacher there sat me down and goes, "Do not trust this woman."
Oh, wow.
She was
I didn't know that.
She's not honourable. She's not honest. And I was like, oh, crap.
Wow.
And then, so I'd kind of already, but I didn't want to leave you hanging. And I was like, I kind of wanted to see Japan. So I was like, well, let me just go there and figure it out. So I went anyway. But I had fair warning.
Wow. I didn't think I knew that part of the contract. Oh, wow. I don't blame you. Crocky Moses.
But maybe I didn't.
Oh, you may have done, but maybe I blocked it from my memory because I was so angry about the whole situation.
Yeah.
But because that first week I got there, she was like, "Okay, so here's what you're going to get paid. Your rent's going to be 55,000 yen a month, so about $550. You get your own apartment, and I'll pay you after you've earned that money for your rent. So I wasn't going to get paid until I'd pay my rent." And so first week, I think I did something stupid like 72 hours of teaching. Like it was a stupid amount of work. But in my head, I was just like, it's fine. We can do this for a little while and then we'll move on to the next gig and the next gig and see where things take us. So that first week, I was like, so if I can work 72 hours, a week, maybe have a weekend off, go to Tokyo, enjoy myself, come back, I can easily save some money. And by the way, training week involved her dropping me off at a class, and then that was it. There was no training. She just kind of dropped me off and went, "Go talk to these people, please." That was it. Just go do it. Second week, my hours dropped to 18, 19 hours when the pay started coming through. And I was like, well, wait a second. Like, I just did this whole week's worth of work for you, and all of a sudden, now that you're paying me, you're just going to drop it off. Like, who's teaching these at the classes? If it's not me, because apparently I was doing all of the classes. Like, who's doing it? And then I realized that she actually had an American confidant there who was actually doing the classes. He was just on a week off, so we came back and took all those classes back. Not to mention the apartment that we were promised was her apartment. We lived with her. That was
it had a great view of the Cebu, so
the Cebu was lovely. And then towards the end, when we basically said to her, "Look, Asa, we're leaving. We can't afford to stay here," and she tried to make it as difficult as possible. I still haven't got my bond back for the apartment that we didn't even stay in.
But let's just say that we went back.
You go.
We went back this year, and what happened to the school, Liam? Closed down.
It wasn't there. It was
boarded
gone.
Up, closed down. So let's just hope her dodgy business practices finally caught up to her.
I think they must have. They must have. If people are back here telling people that she's not honourable, that doesn't stand in Japan. It does not stand. It does not stand. But no, when she came back to Perth and she goes, I'm leaving next week. You guys have to both leave and go to the apartment, which turns out the apartment was like right next to the school, was available for us the entire time. And she just never told us. She just never told us.
Strange character.
She was,
Could have been worse. Could have been worse.
It could have been worse because we may not have had the experience we had afterwards, which was going to work on the farms, woofing in Okinawa.
Exactly right. So we did it. Ended up getting a life-changing experience through that whole process. Through going through the school of hard knocks, so to speak. We ended up on the other side.
That's right.
Working on a farm, which we'd both, I think, gone for a bit of a health kick. We'd like, let's go woof on an organic farm and get some exercise and work out in the fresh air. And just had the biggest party animal hosts. Well, actually, not our direct host, but like we kind of hosted by the whole town, and the whole town took us in, and they liked to party. And
they did they not? It's just like hilarious. Every time we finished a day of work, just here you go, here's a pack of cigarettes and some beer, go nuts. And we'd specifically gone there because we thought the hosts didn't drink, they didn't smoke, they were Seventh-day Adventists, they didn't do any of that stuff, and so we thought perfect one for us to come off our party time in Tokyo. Oopsie daisy, that didn't work out so well. Did it?
It's still a pretty amazing little experience.
I still think about Tamaka-san to this day. What an absolute character that guy was. And it was definitely, I think it was a life-changing experience for both of us. We had a great time. We both lost a lot of weight. I remember I came back one day from my day off and saw you'd shaved your beard completely off, and I had no idea who the heck you were.
Yeah, I probably need to do it again. Let's go back. Asa, I need to lose weight.
Yeah.
Take me
Oh man! Even working the Matsuri as well, like where we played the we helped out with their little carnival game, Kingo Squido. Oh man, memories.
I think we thought we were helping out. So there was a festival, and the festival took place in Okinawa. So Okinawa was where lots of military bases were during the war, where there's still bases, and they had this big festival, Matsuri, on this old World War II airfield, which was this big old World War II airfield, which had all this kind of grass growing over it. And the whole town went down there for a big party. And Tamaka-san was he was like the unofficial mayor of this, what was the name of the town?
Yomitan.
Yomitan. He was the unofficial mayor of Yomitan. And he was just like walking around like the man.
What a dude.
And we were doing the Kinko Squido game with the kids, and we thought like the game, they're obviously here for the game, but no, like we were the attraction. Like,
yes. Yes. It's too...
just like what? Yeah, I think
it was so nice. And then obviously the famous send off where they slaughtered a pig for us, which was an experience all unto itself.
I think that slightly traumatized me. I was actually thinking about that the other day, and I was like, that was really horrific. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, I was just like, man. Anyway, I don't want to delve into that one. That was
no, but I think to me it was a really interesting kind of cultural experience because they were doing it for us, and we couldn't really be like, oh no thanks, it's like
no, exactly.
No, they were doing that for us because we we'd
But
given
also
them
we
months
eat
worth
we
of our
eat meat,
time,
so
and
we
it was
eat
just like,
pork,
well,
and we eat
we
pork.
do.
So
Hmm.
like they would just do it. They were just making it in front of us, and it was just like whoa.
Oh,
But yeah.
yeah, making it from literally from farm to table,
Oh my
literally,
god! Yeah,
100%.
literally, and it was like a big thing. So
Oh,
it was like let's just let's get a bunch of friends around and put a
yeah,
pig on a spit,
yeah,
and it
yeah.
was
It was great.
yeah.
No, I look back on that trip very fondly. It was a lovely trip to have, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think the last time that I actually worked and lived overseas. I'm not forgetting anything, am I? I don't think so. I think that might have been the last time.
Mm,
So
mm,
it's been a minute. It's been a minute because that was in what, 2011, so 12 years ago,
mm.
13 years ago.
The
Crikey
last the
Moses.
last time for now, Liam.
For
The last
now,
time
that's
for
right.
now.
Rob, bring us home with your number one. What's the number one reason for working overseas?
Well, Liam, you can take the boy out of social work, but you can't take social work out of the boy.
That's true.
So self-actualization, Liam.
Okay.
Self-actualization is the tip of the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
There he
It
is.
is
Yep.
the place that we aspire to be as healthy adults. And the one
Oh.
thing I've gained from living abroad and working abroad was looking back after a year and looking at the world and life that you've built for yourself,
Mhm.
and just being like, I came with nothing. I came with
Yeah.
no connections, no friends, 20 kilo luggage, suitcase, and a laptop in the backpack. And 12 months later, I'm leaving with memories, with experiences, with a new sense of myself. I have been changed by this place. I have maybe changed, the people around me in some way. Like, this is what life's about. Like, people come and we impact each other. And I think the fact that
Mhm.
you come with nothing and totally alone, totally vulnerable, and you build a whole world for yourself, when you have that moment after however many months or years it is, every now and then you have a moment where you look around and go, whoa, I've built this for myself. I have self actualized a little bit. I have
Mhm.
created this life and this version of me from nothing.
Yeah.
That is the best part about living and working abroad for a sustained period of time is it's just that feeling.
Yeah. Oh man. I You got me with that answer. You got me with that answer. I couldn't agree with you more. I could not agree with you more.
Mm,
Oh man, amazing.
mm.
Well, Rob, thank you very much for joining me and you on the That's Rank podcast, Gate 42 version. Gate 42. Everyone at home, let us know what your thoughts are. Let us know if you liked it. Give me some feedback. I'm always liking some feedback. Like, share, subscribe, do all the fun stuff to the That's Rank channel. I'll let you know about Gate 42 when it comes around. This will be on there. I'll chuck that on there as well. Who knows? But no, Rob, thank you very much for this. Have you enjoyed yourself, mate?
I have, Liam. Thank you for inviting me. It's been great to reminisce about
Yes,
our
it has.
shared experiences and about experiences
Yes.
I've had elsewhere, but also about our shared experiences. Um,
Yes.
and excuse me while I go and start writing some application letters for jobs abroad.
Yeah, I think I'll be right there with you, man. Right behind you. Right
Yeah,
behind you.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
it's been a pleasure, man. I've had a lot of fun doing this, and I think that'll do us. Now, I probably won't do a final thought for my Gate 42, but I feel like it's tradition for you. If you have one, if you would like to chuck out a cheeky final thought for us, go for it.
A final thought based on this episode. I feel like I threw a few final thoughts naturally. Let me just change
Oh,
it. Let me
yes, you
say
did.
this because this is something I was thinking about today. I went to a conference today, and it stems into my final thought. And the expression was, "You cannot solve a problem." Hold on. Let me hold
Oh,
on.
he's gonna
Pause.
get.
I'm pretty sure I took a photo of this, and I
Yeah,
want to make sure I get it right. See if I
sure.
did take a photo of it. You can cut this. You can cut this part out, Lamb. You can cut
Nah.
this part out.
This is bringing some of the That's Rank podcast back into it. Just
having a look
crazily
through
searching
the
our
old.
phones for answers.
I don't think I actually took a photo of this slide. I think this slide popped up and I realized, I should take photos of this slide.
Mm.
I wrote it down is what I did there. I wrote it down. So let me find out where I wrote it.
I love how you want to get the accuracy. You don't just paraphrase or make shit up like I do if I can't remember something. That's good. Integrity.
Okay, I didn't even write it down, so I'm gonna have to come this up. Okay, let me see if I get this. You can't solve a problem through by going through the same stream of consciousness.
Uh-huh.
So the only way to shift a problem is to shift the consciousness.
Uh-huh.
And if you're going through life finding you're butting your head against the wall and you're not quite making new ground and you don't quite know where to turn, sometimes you just have to shift the consciousness and you have to just go somewhere and do something new. And it may help you see your problems, your life problems, yourself in a little bit of a different light, and it may open a new door and a new opportunity for you. And if that's where you're at, or if you've always thought about it, I can only say one thing: just go and do it.
Go and do it. Beautiful. I do love your final thoughts. They're fantastic. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.